Bentley in this book is tortured and with lifelike dreams in the book. Have you had any more of those dreams since you came up with the concept of the book?
I have a lot of dreams that are really crazy, but none relating back to Bentley. No.
Okay.
No, I think the fuel was the Allegra D and probably what was going on in my life at that time.
Sure. Well, I think it's really awesome. If you were dreaming and figured out eventually that you were living a life in another dimension, would you embrace it or have a hard time getting sleep at night?
That's a really good question because Volume 2, it actually was difficult for me to go back and fix. Volume 2 took me a little bit longer to reconstruct because I kept in my mind, I was battling like, oh my God, would I go back? Would I stay there? Would I try to come back home? Would I want to like finish my life out on Earth? Or that was a difficult discussion that I had with Richard and my wife Deanna very, very often. There was a lot of readers that had contacted us and wanted to know certain things. My friend Richard, again, he was bombarded by a reader almost weekly about, give me a secret, tell me what's going on. And he was like, no, we can't do it. And I kept telling Richard, I was like, boy, I don't know. What am I going to, I don't know if I go this way, what's going to happen, So I tried to plan it as much as I could, for somebody that is like the average person like you and I,
Yeah.
like what would they do? What would they commit to? And how would they go through the issues and the problems? And I think I did a good job. We haven't really got a lot of readers' feedback yet because the book was just released, but
right.
My father read it and he was like, yes, okay, we're done now. It was like he got what he wanted.
That's excellent.
And my dad will be very, very judgmental, which is good because you want that. You don't want your family to be, like, oh, that's great. Oh my God, that was horrible. No, that my family will be honest to me about it. My wife is the same way. She's like, well, that sucks. But that's the feedback that I need. And that's the feedback that, I think help guides it. So
I have that same feedback as well at home. I don't have it like in the distant family, of course, but the close family is very much that way. Which I don't know what we'd do without it. Honestly, everybody needs to have, a higher authority, I think, and good second opinions, and somebody that'll be honest. What's the premise of Volume 2? Have you? Can you give me like a little summary?
So volume 2 focuses mostly on the dystopia part of things. So volume 1 basically was the struggle, the fight, what's going on. Volume 2 connects more with the, I'll say this, the separation, the reconnection of Betty, what's going on between their love relationship and the decision to either try to figure out a way back home to Earth or, how are we going to stay and make this better for these basically these copies of people. So that's the overall direction of Volume 2. Volume 2 has a little bit more of description to help kind of guide things. That's one thing that my dad told me. He's like, there's some areas that in places it helps explain some questions that he had, but then he sometimes felt like, okay, I don't want to know any more about that. I want to get back to the story. So like there's a little bit of instruction that kind of bleeds out a little bit longer, but like in one section, his dog Gabe, I won't tell you how we lead up to this, but his dog is being trained to become a side killer for him, like someone that protects. But it's not under him; it's under somebody else that has saved the dog Gabe. And there's a description there about the different commands and how the dog reacts, and so that can kind of draw out a little bit. But it's very helpful when you get to the end of the book because those instructions and those commands you need to know those so that you can understand how they're applied in the climax of the book.
Wow. So there's a lot of stuff going on, which is excellent. I really enjoy what you're doing, and I would hope that maybe you can come out with a third one. There's been evidence that have come out more, like scientific research and studies about dimensions actually being a real thing. Do you think it's fiction, or do you do you have any stock into it, you think?
Well, with the dream, I didn't have any information about dimensional travel. I had no knowledge about, any of that stuff before, other than, conspiracy theorists and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I had to research it. I had to take some time, and I had to figure out, well, okay, so even though it may not be real, what is the real thinking around it?
Right.
And I had to dive into some deep stuff there where I'm like, what? But
string theory and things like that.
Yeah. There's a lot out there, surprisingly, and like you said, research right now is basically saying there are other dimensions. So when I looked it up, I wanted to follow whatever instruction was already there. I wanted to follow that kind of like already established process. So I found out that the fifth dimension is a traveling dimension. So you have all these other dimensions, but the fifth one is the only one that you can travel into and out of the other dimensions. And I was like, oh, well, that gives me a basis for how all this works.
Yeah.
And it's kind of connected. And I thought, okay, well, this is kind of neat. And I found that information everywhere. Everything revolved around the fifth dimension when it comes to being able to travel between dimensions. I don't necessarily, believe completely in everything, because there's not necessarily proof.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The only proof we have is some posts that scientists have been researching, but it's interesting to say the least that it's possible. I'm not saying that it can't be possible either. I mean, that it is possible. So for those reasons, it's fantasy, and a lot of sci-fi revolves around a lot of technology that has not been discovered yet. But look all the way back into time, and you go into the 1800s. You didn't really have a computer back then, to type thoughts up and stuff like that. But now here we're on Skype, interview on our phones and computers. So it's just the evolution of technology and how it moves. And sometimes, it might be right. Sometimes it might not be right.
I love that you did your research. I think that says a lot. I like how you switched from going to the script to a book and accepting what was, and that's it's one thing about going against the grain. You force something, it's not going to work out. But the fact that let's change course and do this, and you've sold over 1,000 copies, I think you're headed in the right direction. So I'm really proud of it for you, for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You have written and directed Killer Bees, right? That was your writing and directing.
Killer Hornets.
Killer Hornets. Excuse me.
Yeah. So that's going to be our next book that we release. There'll be 4 of those books. So Killer Hornets took an interesting turn when we were done shooting the movie. There was a hard drive crash. So all the footage was lost. So I spent the remaining post-production funds to retrieve all the footage. And I, put a trailer together and I put it online. And it wasn't long that we got quite an interest. I think in one day we received almost 3 calls from distribution companies wanting the movie. And we decided to go with this one company. I won't, say any names right now because it kind of goes into a legal situation. We had an arrangement. There was a contract. There was royalty stuff, and that was all supposed to be signed on a Monday. By Wednesday, we didn't have the deal anymore. And then shortly after that, we get a email from Library of Congress challenging the ownership of Killer Hornets. And this was, the second string of issues that I had to face when it come to creative theft and things like that. And I discussed with my cohort, Richard, and I said, let's just start moving everything to books, because the financial burden that I took on Inquentus and Killer Hornets was too much to try to make another film and try to recoup from that. So it was easier to see, I could spend $1,000 or $1,500 on a book and slowly make the money back over time on the stories.
Yeah.
And so the thought of thinking someone was going to go that far on trying to steal the ownership of Killer Hornets told me that it was definitely marketable material. So that's what we're doing. We're moving Killer Hornets into it's either a 3 or a 4 book series. We're on the third edit pass right now on it. We hope to have some promotional material and maybe a release around winter or after winter time. But it's been fun rewriting it and converting it from the script and stuff. So
it's like what I just mentioned. Sometimes those things happen. It's like happy accidents and mistakes that you make end up making it better. The changes you're making now, who knows? Maybe that's how it was really supposed to be, right?
I've thought that before. Yeah, it's crossed my mind a couple times.
I get worried about the Library of Congress myself. I just had an issue with them recently. I know that they're dealing with low staffing, of course, because of coronavirus. But there's issues with that in general, not just filing and but there's also there's a fine line with music, maybe not so much, but with movies, you can have killer bees, as I mistakenly mentioned, or killer hornets, and you've probably. Have you been worried about the issues of coming out with a book and fighting that ownership issue again?
Well, it took 8 months for them to come back and actually give me a final status that the property was mine. So 8 months of just kind of like what's going on. The other thing is, I had a person out of the blue contact me. He was a California B-movie kind of like marketing PR person. He contacted me about the Killer Hornets trailer way back when, and he wanted to work for Broken Lamp back then, and he wanted to actually, this is awesome, I can't wait to see this, and blah blah blah, we can make your numbers soar. And I just kind of like, whatever, I don't know you, I don't want to do business with you, because I have my own strategies when it comes to promoting, and I can make my own, put my own team together. And this guy kept selling himself, and I, did some background searches on him and found out, he works for a director that it makes a numerous amount of B movies in a year, anywhere between 8 or 10 feature films in a year. Which is pretty gruntish, quick work. Well, once the Murder Hornets, or whatever they call it now, came out, he contacted me after like 4 or 5 years, said, how are things going? And wanted to know where Killer Hornets was at. I said, I gave him the update and told him I was switching it over into a book, and kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And he wanted to make sure that the movie wasn't going to be released. And, so I was like, all right, something's up. And the next thing I know, this director in California that I was telling you about is releasing Murder Hornets, the Asian killer or something. And they had a trailer and everything. And I'm like, they're basically just running off of what's popular, and that's one of the tricks in LA, is to you have your high-end movie industry, then you have your middle industry, and then you have a real low-brow part of the industry. And they basically will make movies really fast, and they'll make them because they know there's a burst of income that can come off after that.
Sure.
You can sell a feature film that you've barely had any money in, to, $10,000-$15,000. So it's a quick bit of cash. And yes, there's a lot of theft in that area, but again, the other thing is, I copyrighted Killer Hornets. So the fact if they would come out and say, yes, Killer Hornets, then I would have a legal, kind of stand. But the fact that the name has changed, I can't do anything. And that's somebody else's product. The same thing with music.
Yep.
You can't copyright a note, but you can copyright a compilation of notes. Mm-hmm. And I believe with I think it's Director's Guild. I'm not sure if it's Director's Guild, but it's 20%, I believe. So if you have something that you can find 20% of the same material in it, then you can legally, fight it as a copyright issue. But I'm not going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to chase some B movie person that's probably already pulled 10 grand off of a quick movie. I think it was made within like 3 months, and they were already out with the trailer, and I think it was already released, which is crazy. I watched a clip of it, and it's horrible. it's so low production. It's like they took one of the the plug-in effects that you get from like Production Crate or something like that, mm-hmm. and they just like superimposed it over top of stuff. And there's no lighting, there's no shading, you can tell the tearing underneath the bugs, and it's like taking vaudeville and putting it on camera. That's
depressing, is what it is.
It is, but that I'm not gonna go chase after stuff like that, because once a book comes out, that's it. It's there. It's a physical thing. It's there. There's a lot more problems when it comes to a film. There's a lot more money, and it's easier for me to get these stories out in a book format now. And like you said, maybe that's where I should have been a long time ago, and I didn't realize it. But it just takes us that amount of time to learn from those mistakes to adapt from them.